as we came into phase 2 for restoration, there was a number of components or details that were missing, so they had to be replicated. For instance, for the landing gear, it had the two rear landing gear, but it didn't have the nose gear, so we had to completely reproduce or replicate this original component, and it's an exact copy of the original. Here's the assembled replica component. It's not painted yet, but you can see that the detail is exact. Now that was molded out of a two-piece mold, so we had to isolate one of the quadrants for the gear, and then make a fairly sophisticated two-piece mold. This is how it comes out. And within the casting was placed a threaded piece of all thread so that it could be mounted into the fuselage of the ship. That's just one of 30 molds that were created to replicate pieces that were missing.
This is the original landing gear. The doors for the gear sits on top of that. And these are some other doors that we use to replicate parts that would now cover the nose gear that were missing completely. We molded them in a way that none of the detail would get destroyed, or none of the color, there would be no discoloration. And the original makers had a nice little cavity in here. And there's no fasteners yet, but it eventually will sit right there. With the gear doors and everything.
He'll drive it.
The vectoring flaps, this is one of the originals that was remaining from the model. We had to come back in and create molds. There's a mold right now. This is one of the medium-sized vector flaps. This is cast in a two-part plastic urethane, and so the replica is here. It hasn't been trimmed yet, but you can see no details lost. So that's the process we're using. If we're lucky enough to have a component that's remaining, we just remold it and replicate it. One of the larger pieces that was missing was this multiple outlet exhaust platform for the engines.
Here we have a completely generated part and an existing part. You really can't tell the difference. The only way you can tell is by flipping them over. There obviously was a design change midway. They went from less rocket power to much more. This is the replacement for one of them that we're missing.
The original pieces were made out of at least 50 individual components, and which aren't available anymore. So what we had to do was come up with a mold system that would replicate the interior as well as the exterior. You can see it's a core mold. So that allows the inside detail to be the same as the outside detail, which in essence it reproduces the original part exactly without having to make it out of 100 separate little pieces. These are the largest exhaust nozzles that were on the Nostromo. They're still in kind of a rough state because we're in the process of restoring them. This is one of the replicated outlets that fits right inside there like that. So you can see, kind of get a feeling for how it's going to look when it's back to its original state. And then with that are these replicated vectoring flaps that will go in an octagon around the outside of that.
Umbilicus clear.
We replaced some of these engine parts. We had some old ones that had warped quite badly, and so we're busy repairing, replacing components. This part eventually, after it's cleaned up, there's a lip on it that will be trimmed off, but it'll sit around the perimeter of the engine. It's made very thin so it's flexible. And also because you don't want to take up too much real estate. But that'll eventually sit around similar to these. These are all cast around here too. These are original. From here to here. Originally there was a series of flaps that encapsulate these upper parts. And the only part that remains of them is this, which is the center section. So we have to recreate that part as well as the part that's entirely missing times 16 to to complete these engine parts.
For surface texture, there was a number of large areas that were missing all of the surface detail, so we've replicated the type of detailing that was on there.
These parts could flex and bend around corners of the ship, and we could cut and trim them to shape to fit any corners. We'd try to match panels that were existing with panels that were on here, so that they would blend in and work pretty well.
Part of the challenge with restoring this model is to touch up the panels that we've added and keep the integrity and the look, the feeling of the original paint job. You want it to blend, but it has to have its own personality so that it doesn't stand out. You want each panel to have the same exact feeling that it had when it was created. So that's been an ongoing thing, and I think that generally the feeling is exactly like it looked originally, and we're going to maintain that through the rest of the model.
In the upper turret, we have some pictures which you probably will see where the majority, it's pretty much bare wood up here when we first got it. There was a majorly distorted part here. It had shrunken by 20%. It's kind of a feature piece. It's the centerpiece of this. It's this tank turret from an old British Matilda tank. So we at first attempted to straighten out the piece and flex it back into shape, but then it was hopeless. We ended up searching for reference as to which tank it was. We found it, and we purchased the kit, and then it's the exact same kit, fit in perfectly, and there it sits now, brand new. Other than that, everything else you see here is bits and pieces, majorly consists of bits and pieces from the original ship. There's some parts that haven't been painted yet. There's a couple of radar dishes that'll go on here. The covers for the nacelles and stuff like that will be generated soon.
This was very prominent in the first video, that this was all replaced or missing panels. You can see with the finished paint job how well it blends into the existing material that's there. In addition, Jack had talked about how these nose pieces or nacelles on the intakes were all bare wood that had shrunken away. Well, that's been refurbished, repaired, and matching panels to the existing photographs that we had to replicate how it looked in during filming. So you can see how this whole section has been restored, sealed, rebonded, and it's ready to go.
92 degrees, port yaw.
Prime the port.
We're looking forward to seeing you in Phase 3 when we're replicating all of the missing components that you expect to see